You never really know what you're capable of surviving until you're standing at the edge of something you can't explain. For some, it's a shadow in the woods that moves when it shouldn't. For others, it's a voice on the other end of a dead phone line, whispering your name in the dark. Most people will go their whole lives without ever brushing up against the unknown, but for a handful of survivors, the world is a stranger place than anyone wants to admit. Tonight you'll hear their stories, told in their own words, as close to the truth as memory allows. Some of these people have never spoken about what happened to them, not to friends, not to family, not even to themselves in the quiet hours before sleep, but they remember. And after tonight, you will too. The first story comes from a man named Daniel, who grew up in the shadow of the Appalachian Mountains. He was the kind of person who never believed in ghosts, never gave much thought to the stories his grandmother told about the old woods. But that changed the summer he turned 17. Daniel's family owned a small cabin deep in the forest, a place they visited every year to fish, hunt, and get away from the world. That year, Daniel went up alone for the first time, eager to prove he could handle himself. The first 2 days were uneventful, just the usual sounds of birds, the wind in the trees, the distant rush of a creek. But on the third night, something changed. He woke up to the sound of footsteps outside the cabin, not the heavy, deliberate steps of a person, but something lighter, almost hesitant. He lay there, heart pounding, listening as the footsteps circled the cabin. Once, twice, 3 times, then silence. Daniel told himself it was just a deer, maybe a raccoon, but when he finally worked up the nerve to look outside, he saw something he still can't explain. There in the moonlight were dozens of footprints, bare, human footprints, leading away from the cabin and into the trees. He followed them for a few yards, flashlight trembling in his hand, until the prints simply stopped. No sign of where the person or thing had gone. No broken branches, no disturbed leaves, just empty forest, silent and watching. Daniel never went back to the cabin after that. He says he still dreams about those footprints, about the way the woods seemed to close in around him, thick with secrets. He's not sure what he saw that night, but he knows it wasn't human, and he's never felt truly safe in the dark since. Contrast that with the story of Maribel, a nurse from New Mexico who encountered something far stranger in the middle of a busy hospital. Maribel had worked the night shift for years, seen her share of tragedy and miracles, but nothing prepared her for the night she met the woman in room 413. The patient was an older woman admitted for a routine procedure. She was quiet, polite, and seemed to have no family. Maribel checked on her every hour, making sure she was comfortable. Around 3 a.m., she heard the woman talking to someone softly, though no one else was in the room. Maribel stepped in, expecting to find a visitor who'd slipped past the nurse's station. But the woman was alone, staring at the far corner of the room, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Who were you talking to?" Maribel asked, trying to keep her voice gentle. The woman didn't answer. She just kept staring, lips moving in a silent conversation. Maribel felt a chill crawl up her spine. She checked the monitors, adjusted the IV, and tried to ignore the feeling that she was being watched. As she turned to leave, the woman grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "He's waiting for you. He's been waiting a long time," the woman whispered. Maribel pulled away, heart racing. She left the room and told herself it was just the stress of the job, the late hour, the flicker of fluorescent lights. But when she checked the monitors from the nurse's station, she saw something that made her blood run cold. For a split second, the camera feed from room 413 showed not one, but 2 figures standing by the bed. One was the patient. The other was a tall, shadowy shape, featureless and impossibly dark. The feed glitched, and the second figure was gone.
The woman died an hour later. Maribel never saw the shadow again, but she still dreams about that night. She says she can feel it sometimes, standing just out of sight, waiting. Not all encounters with the unknown happen in the dead of night. Some come in the bright light of day, when you least expect them. Take the story of Marcus, a truck driver from Nebraska, who spent most of his life on the open road. Marcus prided himself on his nerves of steel, his ability to handle anything the highway could throw at him. But one afternoon, driving through a stretch of empty prairie, he saw something that made him question everything he thought he knew. It started with a shape on the horizon, a figure walking along the side of the road. As Marcus got closer, he realized it was a young girl, maybe 10 or 11, wearing a white dress. She didn't look up as he passed, didn't react to the roar of the engine. Marcus slowed down, worried she might be lost or in trouble. He pulled over, got out, and called to her. The girl stopped, turned, and looked at him with eyes that were far too old for her face. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, taking a cautious step forward. The girl didn't answer. She just smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that never reached her eyes. Then she turned and walked into the tall grass, vanishing from sight. Marcus searched for her, called the police, even drove up and down the same stretch of road for hours. No one ever reported a missing child. No one else saw the girl. But Marcus still sees her sometimes in his rearview mirror, standing by the side of the road, waiting for someone else to stop. Some stories linger in the mind not because of what was seen, but because of what was felt. An unshakable sense that something was terribly wrong, even if you couldn't put your finger on it. That's how it was for Olivia, a college student from Vermont, whose encounter with the unknown left her questioning the very nature of reality. Olivia had always been a rational person, the kind who double-checked the locks and laughed at ghost stories. She was studying late one night in the university library, a sprawling old building with creaking floors and endless rows of books. It was nearly midnight, and she was the only one left on the third floor. The silence was comforting at first, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional distant footstep from the janitor below. She was packing up her things when she heard it, a faint whisper, so soft she thought she'd imagined it. She paused, listening, but heard nothing more. Shrugging it off, she slung her bag over her shoulder and headed for the stairs. That's when she saw the figure at the end of the aisle. It was a man, tall and thin, dressed in an old-fashioned suit. He stood perfectly still, his face hidden in shadow. "Excuse me?" Olivia called, her voice echoing in the empty space. The man didn't move. He didn't even seem to breathe. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. She took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to leave. But curiosity got the better of her. She took a cautious step forward, peering down the aisle. The man was gone. There was nowhere he could have gone. No doors, no side passages, just rows of books and the silent, watching dark.
Olivia hurried down the stairs, her heart pounding. She told herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the light and the late hour. But as she reached the exit, she glanced back up at the third floor. There, in the window, she saw the man's silhouette, watching her leave. She never studied alone in the library again. Some encounters leave scars that never fully heal. For James, a firefighter from Oregon, the unknown came in the form of a voice that saved his life, but left him with more questions than answers. It was a routine call, a house fire in a quiet neighborhood. The flames were already licking at the roof when James and his team arrived. He was the first one inside, searching for anyone trapped in the smoke-filled rooms. He found a young boy, huddled in a closet, coughing and terrified. James scooped him up and started for the door, but the smoke was thick and the heat was unbearable. He lost his sense of direction, stumbling through the burning house, the boy clinging to his neck. That's when he heard it, a woman's voice, clear and calm, calling his name. "James, this way." He followed the voice, turning left when every instinct told him to go right. He burst through a door and found himself outside, gasping for air, the boy still safe in his arms. When he looked back, the house collapsed in a shower of sparks and ash. Later, he asked his team if anyone else had been inside, if anyone had called his name. They all shook their heads. No one else had known where he was. No one else had called out. James still wonders who or what guided him to safety that night. Contrast that with the story of Priya, a software engineer from Mumbai, whose encounter with the unknown was as subtle as it was terrifying. Priya lived alone in a high-rise apartment, her life a comfortable routine of work, friends, and quiet evenings. One night, she woke to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was 2:47 a.m., an odd time for anyone to call. The screen showed an unknown number, but something compelled her to answer. At first, there was only static. Then, a faint voice, barely audible over the crackle. "Don't look outside. it whispered.
Priya sat up, heart pounding. She glanced at the window, drawn by a mix of fear and curiosity. Outside, the city was silent, the lights of distant buildings twinkling in the haze. She saw nothing unusual, but the voice came again, louder this time. "Don't look outside." She hung up, her hand shaking. She tried to go back to sleep, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The next morning, she found muddy footprints on her balcony, bare, human footprints, leading to the window and then vanishing into thin air. Priya moved out a week later, unable to shake the feeling that something had been waiting for her to look. Not all survivors are adults. Some are children, their memories blurred by time but never truly forgotten. Take the story of twins, Ben and Lily, who grew up in a small town in Maine. They were inseparable, always exploring the woods behind their house, building forts and pretending to hunt monsters. One summer afternoon, they found a clearing they'd never seen before, a perfect circle of grass, untouched and eerily quiet. They played there for hours, chasing each other in the sunlight. But as the shadows grew long, they realized they couldn't find the path back home. The woods seemed to shift around them, every tree looking the same, every direction leading nowhere. Panic set in. They called for help, but their voices were swallowed by the silence. Just as the last light faded, they heard music, a soft, haunting melody drifting through the trees. They followed it, desperate for any sign of life. The music led them to the edge of the woods where their parents were searching, frantic with worry. Ben and Lily never found the clearing again. They still remember the music, though, and the feeling that something in the woods had been watching, waiting for them to stay just a little longer. Some encounters with the unknown are violent, leaving behind not just fear, but physical scars. That's what happened to Alex, a hiker from Colorado who set out alone on a trail he'd walked 100 times before. The day was clear, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. Alex was halfway up the mountain when he heard a sound behind him, a low, guttural growl that made the hair on his neck stand up. He turned, expecting to see a bear or a mountain lion. Instead, he saw nothing. The forest was silent, the only movement the rustle of leaves in the wind. Alex kept walking, but the feeling of being followed grew stronger with every step. He started to run, his breath coming in ragged gasps. That's when something slammed into him from behind, knocking him to the ground. He never saw what it was. He remembers claws, teeth, a blur of fur and shadow. He fought back, kicking and screaming, until the thing let go and vanished into the trees. Alex stumbled back to his car, bleeding and shaken. The doctors said his wounds looked like animal bites, but Alex knows better. He's never gone hiking alone again. Some encounters with the unknown don't just haunt the mind, they change the course of a life. For some, the world is never the same again. That's how it was for Henry, a retired police officer from rural Illinois, whose story begins on a foggy stretch of highway just after midnight. Henry had seen his share of strange things during his years on the force, but nothing prepared him for what happened that night. He was driving home after a late shift, the road empty, except for the occasional flash of headlights in the distance. The fog was thick, swallowing the world beyond the reach of his headlights. As he rounded a bend, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, a woman in a long white dress, her hair hanging loose around her face. Henry slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. The car skidded to a stop just feet from the woman, who didn't flinch, didn't move. He rolled down the window, calling out to her, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on something far away, as if she were looking through him. Henry got out, approaching slowly, one hand on his radio. The air was cold, the silence absolute. When he reached her, she finally spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Don't let him find me," she said. Before Henry could respond, the woman turned and walked into the fog, vanishing as if she'd never been there at all. He searched the area, called for backup, but found nothing.
No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. The next morning, he learned that a woman matching her description had gone missing from a nearby town a week earlier. Her body was never found. Henry still drives that road sometimes, hoping for answers, but all he finds is fog and the memory of a voice begging for help. Contrast that with the story of Tasha, a paramedic from Atlanta whose encounter with the unknown was as intimate as it was terrifying. Tasha had always prided herself on her composure, her ability to stay calm in the face of chaos. But one night, she was called to a house on the outskirts of the city, a routine welfare check that turned into anything but. The house was old, its windows dark, the front door slightly ajar. Tasha and her partner announced themselves, stepping inside. The air was thick with the smell of dust and something else. Something sweet and rotten. They found the homeowner, an elderly man, sitting in a chair in the living room, staring at the wall. He was alive, but unresponsive, his eyes wide and glassy. As Tasha checked his pulse, she felt a sudden chill, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in an instant. She looked up and saw a shadow move across the far wall, quick and silent. Her partner didn't see it, but Tasha felt it, a presence, cold and heavy, pressing down on her chest. She finished her assessment, helped the man onto a stretcher, and left the house as quickly as she could.
Later, as they drove to the hospital, the man finally spoke. His voice was weak but clear. "It's still in the house," he whispered. "Don't go back." Tasha never did. She still dreams about that shadow, about the way it seemed to watch her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Some encounters with the unknown are shared, binding people together in ways they never expected. That's what happened to a group of friends from Montana who set out on a camping trip that would change their lives forever. There were 4 of them: Sam, Rachel, Tyler, and Jess. Old friends who'd grown up together, now scattered across the country, but reunited for one last adventure. They pitched their tents by a remote lake, miles from the nearest town. The first night was uneventful, filled with laughter and stories around the campfire. But on the second night, things took a turn. It started with strange noises in the woods, branches snapping, footsteps crunching in the underbrush. At first, they thought it was just animals, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But the sounds grew louder, closer, until it felt like something was circling their camp. Sam shone his flashlight into the trees, but saw nothing. The others huddled together, nerves fraying. Then, without warning, the noises stopped. The silence was deafening. That's when they saw the eyes. Dozens of them, glowing in the darkness, watching from the edge of the woods. The friends froze, too terrified to move. The eyes blinked, shifted, then vanished all at once, as if whatever was out there had simply melted into the night. They packed up and left at first light, abandoning their gear. None of them ever spoke about what they saw. Not really. But they all agree on one thing. Something was out there. Something that didn't want them to stay. Not all encounters with the unknown are terrifying. Some are simply inexplicable, leaving behind a sense of wonder and awe. That's how it was for Elena, a teacher from Portugal, who experienced something she still can't explain. Elena was hiking alone in the mountains, enjoying the solitude and the beauty of the landscape. She stopped to rest by a small stream, the water sparkling in the afternoon sun. As she sat there, she heard music, soft, ethereal, unlike anything she'd ever heard before. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the air with a sense of peace. Elena closed her eyes,
letting the music wash over her. When she opened them again, the world seemed different. Brighter, more vivid, as if she were seeing it for the first time. The music faded, and Elena continued her hike, but she never forgot that moment. She still wonders if she stumbled into another world, if only for a few minutes. The experience left her with a sense of gratitude, a reminder that the unknown isn't always something to fear.
But for most survivors, the unknown is a source of terror, a reminder that the world is bigger and stranger than we can ever truly understand. These stories are just a few of the countless encounters that happen every day in every corner of the world. Some are shared, whispered around campfires, or posted on late-night forums. Others are kept secret, locked away in the deepest parts of the mind. What unites them all is the sense that, for a moment, the veil between worlds grew thin, and something reached through. Some encounters with the unknown are so strange, so impossible, that even the people who live through them struggle to believe their own memories. For some, the only way to cope is to tell themselves it was a dream, a trick of the mind, a story that happened to someone else. But deep down, they know the truth. That's how it was for Marcus and his wife Leah, who experienced something together that neither of them can explain, even after all these years. It was a late summer evening, the kind where the air is thick with the scent of cut grass and the hum of cicadas. Marcus and Leah were driving home from a friend's barbecue, taking the back roads through the countryside. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. They were laughing about something silly, the windows down, music playing low. Then, without warning, the car's headlights flickered and died. The engine sputtered, then went silent, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. At first, they thought it was just a mechanical problem. Marcus got out to check under the hood, while Leah stayed in the car, scrolling through her phone for a signal. That's when she saw the lights. Strange, pulsing orbs hovering above the field across the road. They moved in patterns, weaving and circling, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Leah called out to Marcus, who looked up and saw them too. For a moment, they just stared, unable to move or speak. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights shot straight up into the sky and vanished. The car's engine roared back to life, the headlights flickered on, and the radio blared a burst of static before settling back into music. Marcus and Leah drove home in silence, too shaken to talk about what they'd seen. They tried to rationalize it, drones, swamp gas, a trick of the light, but nothing made sense. To this day, they still wonder what really happened on that lonely road, and why they were chosen to witness it. Contrast that with the story of Darnell, a security guard from Detroit, whose encounter with the unknown was as mundane as it was terrifying. Darnell worked the night shift at an old office building downtown, a place that always felt a little too empty after dark. He'd gotten used to the creaks and groans of the building settling, the way the lights flickered in the hallways, but one night, something happened that he still can't explain.
It started with a noise. A soft tapping, like someone knocking on a window. Darnell checked the security cameras, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. He made his rounds, flashlight in hand, telling himself it was just the wind. But the tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. He followed the sound to the basement, where the air was cold and damp, the walls lined with old filing cabinets and forgotten boxes. There, in the far corner, he saw a door he'd never noticed before. It was small, barely big enough for a child, and covered in peeling paint. The tapping was coming from the other side. Darnell hesitated, every instinct telling him to leave, but curiosity got the better of him. He reached for the handle, but before he could touch it, the tapping stopped. The silence was sudden, absolute. Darnell backed away, heart racing, and left the basement as quickly as he could. The next morning, he checked the corner again. The door was gone. Just a blank wall, as if it had never existed. Darnell still works in the building, but he never goes down to the basement alone. Some encounters with the unknown are so subtle, so easy to dismiss, that they almost slip through the cracks of memory. That's how it was for Sophia, a young mother from Brazil, whose story is as quiet as a whisper. Sophia was home alone with her infant daughter, the house silent except for the soft sounds of the baby breathing. She was dozing on the couch when she heard a lullaby, soft, sweet, and unfamiliar, drifting through the air. At first, she thought it was coming from the baby monitor, but the device was off. The music grew louder, filling the room with a sense of peace. Sophia felt herself drifting, her eyelids growing heavy. She woke with a start. The music gone, the house silent once more. Her daughter was still asleep, safe and sound. Sophia never heard the lullaby again, but she sometimes wonders if something was watching over them that night. Something kind and gentle. But not all stories end with comfort. Some leave behind a sense of dread that never truly fades. That's what happened to Ethan, a college student from California whose encounter with the unknown left him questioning his own sanity. Ethan was staying in a friend's apartment while they were out of town, enjoying the solitude and the chance to catch up on his studies. The building was old, the kind with creaky floors and thin walls, but Ethan didn't mind. One night, as he was drifting off to sleep, he heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to belong to any of the neighbors he'd seen. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and Ethan held his breath, waiting. After a long moment, he heard a soft, raspy voice whisper his name. He froze, every muscle tensed, listening as the voice repeated his name over and over, growing louder with each repetition. Ethan never opened the door. He lay there, paralyzed with fear, until the sun rose and the voice finally faded. When his friend returned, Ethan asked if anyone else had a key to the apartment. His friends shook their head. No one else should have been there. Ethan moved out the next day, unable to shake the feeling that something had been waiting for him on the other side of that door.
Some encounters with the unknown are so deeply personal that they become a secret you carry for the rest of your life. For some, the experience is a wound that never fully heals. For others, it's a strange kind of gift, a reminder that the world is bigger, stranger, and more mysterious than we can ever truly know. That's how it was for Grace, a retired school teacher from Ireland, whose story begins on a windswept cliff overlooking the sea. Grace had always loved the ocean, the way it changed with the weather, the endless rhythm of the waves. She often walked the cliffs at dusk, letting the wind clear her mind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she saw something in the water, a shape, dark and massive, moving just beneath the surface. At first, she thought it was a whale, but as she watched, the shape grew larger, rising from the depths until it broke the surface. It was unlike anything Grace had ever seen. Long and sinuous, with scales that shimmered in the fading light, the creature moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic. It raised its head, eyes meeting hers across the distance. For a moment, Grace felt a connection, a sense of understanding, as if the creature was as curious about her as she was about it. Then, with a flick of its tail, it vanished beneath the waves, leaving only ripples behind. Grace never told anyone what she saw, afraid of being dismissed as a dreamer or a liar, but she still walks the cliffs, hoping for another glimpse of the unknown. That's contrasted with the story of Malik, a taxi driver from Cairo whose encounter with the unknown was as sudden as it was terrifying. Malik was driving the night shift, weaving through the city's crowded streets, when he picked up a passenger near the old market. The man was quiet, dressed in a dark suit, his face hidden in the shadows. He gave Malik an address on the outskirts of the city, a place Malik had never been. As they drove, the city fell away, replaced by empty roads and silent fields. The man said nothing, staring out the window as if lost in thought. When they reached the address, Malik turned to tell the man they had arrived, but the back seat was empty.
The door had never opened and the seat was cold, as if no one had ever been there at all. Malik drove back to the city in silence, his hands shaking on the wheel. He still wonders who or what he picked up that night and where they were really going. Some encounters with the unknown are shared by entire communities, leaving behind stories that become legend. That's what happened in a small town in Alaska, where the residents still talk about the night the sky turned green. It was the middle of winter, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The northern lights were brighter than anyone had ever seen, painting the sky in shades of emerald and gold. As the townspeople gathered outside to watch, they saw something move across the sky, a shape, dark and massive, gliding silently above the lights. It was too big to be a plane, too fast to be a cloud. Some said it was a ship, others a creature, but no one could agree on what they'd seen. The shape vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only questions and awe.
To this day, the people of that town still look up at the sky on cold winter nights, wondering if the unknown will return. But not all stories are shared. Some are so strange, so impossible, that they become a burden carried alone. That's how it was for Lucas, a young man from Argentina, whose encounter with the unknown left him questioning his own mind. Lucas was hiking in the Andes, far from any sign of civilization, when he stumbled upon a cave hidden behind a waterfall. The air inside was cool and damp, the walls covered in ancient paintings. As Lucas explored, he heard a voice, a low, melodic chant that seemed to come from the very stones. He followed the sound deeper into the cave, the light from his flashlight flickering. The chant grew louder, filling the space with a sense of power and mystery. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath his feet, and Lucas fell, tumbling into darkness. He woke hours later at the mouth of the cave, the sun high in the sky. His flashlight was gone, and the paintings on the walls had changed. New shapes, new symbols, as if someone or something had added to them while he slept. Lucas left the mountains that day, unable to shake the feeling that he had been marked by the unknown. Some encounters with the unknown are so brief, so fleeting, that they leave behind only a question, a moment that lingers in the mind, impossible to forget. That's how it was for Mia, a college student from Toronto, who was walking home late one night when she saw a figure standing beneath a street lamp. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his face hidden in shadow. As Mia approached, the figure turned and looked at her. She felt a jolt of fear, but also a strange sense of recognition, as if she'd seen him before. The figure raised a hand in greeting, then vanished, leaving Mia alone on the empty street. She still wonders who he was and why he felt so familiar. For all these survivors, the unknown is a part of their story, a chapter they never expected, a mystery that may never be solved. Their encounters are reminders that the world is full of secrets, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough or unlucky enough to stumble upon them. Some encounters with the unknown are so deeply unsettling that they change the way a person sees the world forever. For some, the experience is a shadow that follows them, a question that never quite finds an answer. That's how it was for Jonah, a park ranger from Wyoming, whose story begins on a cold autumn night in the heart of the wilderness. Jonah had always loved the solitude of the forest, the way the world seemed to slow down beneath the towering pines. He was used to the sounds of the wild, wolves howling in the distance, the rustle of deer in the underbrush, the wind sighing through the trees. But one night, as he made his rounds near an old fire tower, he heard something he'd never heard before, a low, rhythmic drumming, like the beating of a giant heart. He followed the sound, flashlight cutting through the darkness, until he reached a clearing he'd never seen before. In the center stood a circle of stones, ancient and weathered, their surfaces covered in strange symbols. The drumming grew louder, vibrating through the ground until Jonah felt it in his bones. He stood there, transfixed, as a figure emerged from the shadows. A tall, thin shape,
its face hidden under a hood. The figure raised its hands and the drumming stopped. For a moment the world was silent. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere, the figure spoke. "You do not belong here." Jonah turned and ran, stumbling through the trees until he reached the safety of his truck. He never found the clearing again, no matter how many times he searched. But sometimes late at night, he still hears the drumming, faint and distant, calling him back to the unknown. Contrast that with the story of Yara, a journalist from Istanbul, whose encounter with the unknown was as subtle as it was profound. Yara was covering a story on ancient ruins in the countryside, interviewing locals about the legends that surrounded the site. Most of the stories were the usual mix of myth and history, but one old woman told Yara something she would never forget. The woman spoke of a door hidden among the stones, a door that only appeared at dusk when the light was just right. She said that those who found the door and stepped through would never return the same. Yara was skeptical, but curiosity got the better of her. She returned to the ruins at sunset, searching for the door. She never found the door again, but the memory of that other world haunts her dreams. She wonders what would have happened if she'd stepped through, and whether the unknown is always something to fear or sometimes something to long for. Some encounters with the unknown are so strange, so impossible, that they become a kind of private mythology, a story you tell yourself in the quiet moments, a secret you keep even from those closest to you. That's how it was for Tomás, a fisherman from Chile, whose story begins on a foggy morning at sea. Tomás was alone in his boat, the world reduced to a circle of gray mist. He was used to the ocean's moods, the way it could shift from calm to fury in an instant. But that morning, the sea was eerily still, the only sound the gentle slap of water against the hull. As he cast his net, he saw something move beneath the surface, a shape, dark and massive, gliding silently through the water. At first, he thought it was a whale, but as the shape drew closer, he realized it was something else, something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world. The creature surfaced for a moment, its eyes meeting Tomás's across the water. In that instant, Tomás felt a wave of emotion, fear, awe, and a strange sense of recognition, as if he were looking at something he'd known in another life. The creature vanished, leaving Tomás alone in the mist. He returned to shore, unable to speak of what he'd seen. But every time he goes out to sea, he looks for the creature, hoping for another glimpse of the unknown. Not all encounters with the unknown are terrifying. Some are moments of beauty, of wonder, of connection to something greater than ourselves. That's how it was for Aisha, a young woman from Kenya whose story begins on the edge of the savannah. Aisha was walking home at dusk, the sky ablaze with color, when she saw a herd of elephants moving silently through the grass. She stopped to watch, marveling at their grace and power. As she stood there, one of the elephants broke away from the herd and approached her, its eyes gentle and wise. Aisha felt no fear, only a sense of peace. The elephant raised its trunk, touching her shoulder with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. For a moment, Aisha felt as if she were part of something ancient and sacred, a connection that transcended words. The elephant returned to the herd, and Aisha continued home, changed by the encounter. For all these survivors, the unknown is a part of their story, a reminder that the world is full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. Their encounters are a testament to the power of the unknown, to the ways it can shape our lives, our memories, and our sense of what is possible. Some encounters with the unknown never truly end. They become a part of you, a shadow that lingers at the edge of your vision, a question that echoes in the quiet moments before sleep. For every survivor who has faced the inexplicable, there is a moment, a heartbeat, when the world shifts and nothing is ever quite the same again. That's how it was for Natalie, a social worker from Seattle, whose story is as much about what she didn't see as what she did. Natalie was driving home late one night after a long shift, the city lights fading behind her as she crossed the bridge over the bay. The water below was black and still, reflecting the stars above. As she reached the center of the bridge, her headlights caught something in the road,
a figure tall and thin, standing perfectly still. She slowed, heart pounding, but as she drew closer, the figure vanished, dissolving into mist. She pulled over, shaken, and looked out over the water. For a moment, she thought she saw something moving beneath the surface, shapes shifting and swirling, just out of reach. She never told anyone about that night, but sometimes when she crosses the bridge, she feels the weight of unseen eyes watching from below.
For some, the unknown is a source of fear, a reminder that the world is not as safe or predictable as we'd like to believe. For others, it's a source of wonder, a glimpse into the vastness of existence, a hint that there is more to life than what we can see or touch. The survivors whose stories you've heard tonight are not so different from you. They are ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary circumstances, who faced the unknown and lived to tell the tale. Their stories are a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, waiting to be discovered. Sometimes those mysteries are terrifying. Sometimes they're beautiful. But always they are a part of what makes us human. The need to explore, to question, to seek out the edges of what is known and peer into the darkness beyond. So the next time you find yourself alone in the woods, or walking a quiet street at night, or staring out at the endless sea, remember, you are not alone. The unknown is always out there, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for you. Thank you for listening to these stories. If you have your own encounter with the unknown, you are not alone. There are others out there, searching for answers, holding on to hope, and waiting for the day when the mysteries of the world finally reveal themselves.